Welcome to the A.L.I.V.E. Active Shooter Survival Training Program, where the experts break down active shooter incidents to discuss and assess each event to help you stay alive. This is your host, security expert and creator of the A.L.I.V.E. Active Shooter Survival Training Program, Michael Julian.
Welcome, everybody, to the next edition of the A.L.I.V.E. Active Shooter Survival Training Podcast. My name is Michael Julian. I'm the creator of the A.L.I.V.E. program, and with me today is my good friend, Mark Gillespie. Mark, how are you doing today?
Doing great, Mike. How about you?
Good, thanks. Mark's out of Texas. How's the weather out there, Mark?
It's a beautiful day today. A little cool, but last week we had mid-70s.
Yeah.
And then it's been great. Followed into the weekend with excellent weather. Then last night it got cold, and it's going to warm up again.
Well, it's sunny, but 61, or the high is 61 today, which is a cold front in Southern California, but I'll take it. I was just in Vegas over the weekend for the International Protective Security Board annual executive protection conference with like 415 or 430 executive protection agents from all over the world. That was a lot of fun. The weather was a little bit nicer because it's the desert, but it was still a little chilly, but it wasn't too bad. Unfortunately, we have two new active shooter events to talk about today. One was on December 6th in Pensacola, Florida, and that was at a naval air station. A second lieutenant in the Saudi Arabian military, involved in flight training at the station, was the perpetrator. So these active shooter events are getting more frequent in military installations here in the U.S., which is very alarming. And, we kind of wonder, how in the world do these guys get access to our military? What are they doing here? And that it's a little nuts. So that's not good. And the second one was December 10th in Jersey City. Now, the Jersey City incident, by the way, in the A.L.I.V.E. program, we talk about four different motives, really three, with kind of a fourth being an asterisk, and that is the criminal activity motivated or associated active shooter event, like the Bank of America, North Hollywood shootout after a Bank of America was robbed about 25 years ago. These don't typically, the primary motivation is not an active shooter event. It's usually something that coincides or comes after some kind of criminal activity, a robbery, a theft, whatever. And this one was apparently a detective approached somebody at a cemetery in regards to some kind of homicide investigation, and the detective was shot and killed. And they ended up at a kosher deli in Jersey City, and then had a shootout with law enforcement, and that ended up with several people dying. Which, again, the survival tactics may be the same, but the criminal element or the active shooter event that usually starts with a criminal situation is not the typical active shooter event. Those guys are focused usually on money, and then they may end up shooting at people, like a gang initiation. They go in and rob a donut store or something like that, and then end up trying to kill everybody afterwards to get their stripes in their gang or whatever. In this situation, several people were killed because it was they ended up at this kosher deli, and then I think in the shootout people were shot. So let's focus on the Pensacola shooting. We're seeing this more and more often. The Fort Hood, also don't recall the shooter's name, but at a Navy shipyard. Mark, what are your thoughts on how is this possible that these guys are able to do this? We're talking about military community members that are inside a situation like this, and they end up shooting a bunch of other military people. I mean, what's going on that these people are able to be there?
Well, a couple things are happening. There's a couple issues to address. First of all, most people, the furthest thing from their imagination would be an active shooter situation on a military installation. We saw at Fort Hood the problem with Major Hassan, I believe his name was. That was incredible. I happened to live here at the time, and that was just a scene of total carnage. And we never, especially at a place like Fort Hood, it's an Army base. It's the largest military installation in the world. The security is extremely tight. But even at that time, I think that was even before active shooter situations were on the rise. But in Pensacola, the Pensacola case has been surrounded by active shooter cases. Of course, many before and one or two after. But on that particular base, it's a flight base. They do naval aviation training. And when people think about going onto a base, it's very secure. I can have a gun in my vehicle and I can go through the base. And that's legal. So anyone that lives on the base, may have a handgun, within their home or within their vehicle, just as they would off the installation. Well, when you go to your daily work, you're not. I don't know what the rules are at Pensacola Naval Air Station, but I can tell you that they're not going to allow handguns inside the work center. In this particular case, since they were pilots, it was undergraduate pilot training. They don't. They go to work. It's like going to an office. They go to a hangar. They go to their, every day they're going for classroom and flight instruction. So if they can bring a handgun in there relatively easy without being checked. And I think in most instances, they probably never imagined there would have ever been an incident such as this happening. And I think it's opened their eyes to that reality that, this can happen. And we've said it before, it's not if it will happen, it's when it will happen.
Yep.
So I think the problem in this particular case is that I'm not saying that the Naval Air Station's rules were lax. It was something that no one ever expected this type of scenario to unfold the way it did. And I think they're going to have there's always a cause and effect relationship. Once something happens, then we react to it. And I think they're going to have to react to this scenario in the future to prevent, future incidents from happening. And it's going to have a ripple effect all throughout the military in terms of, handguns, handgun safety, storing weapons, things of that nature.
Yeah.
But one thing that's kind of interesting that, I went through, in my early Air Force career, I went through pilot training. I had the unfortunate circumstance to what we call wash out because I had a health issue that disqualified me from flying. But I mean, I was in a training program that taught foreign students. And I can tell you the students that we had were from Saudi Arabia and Iran. And it is, even though we're students together, there is no camaraderie between the foreign students and the U.S., the American aviators. And I'm not trying to make a political statement or create a negative statement. I'm just saying that you have people from completely different cultures and countries coming together to learn how to fly and fight, but I could probably tell you that there was not much interaction between those students, those foreign students, and the American students. Now, what am I trying to say? Well, all I'm trying to say is that there was no camaraderie, probably not much affection or love, like you would have on a team. So I don't know how that played into the dynamic of the shooting. But anyway. I don't know if that made any sense. I just thought I would
Well,
add a little bit to that if you want to expand on it.
this shooting came just 2 days. The previous week, there was a shooting at the Pearl Harbor Navy shipyard by somebody in the Navy, and they killed 2 civilians and then killed themselves. So, obviously there's a lot of members of military, and they suffer from all kinds of different things, and perhaps their coping skills aren't the best, so they end up doing something like this. But it seems like it's starting to happen more and more often within the military. But then again, that's a representation of what's going on in our society, because these shootings are happening more and more, period, whether of any demographic, military or otherwise. Now, going back to the Saudi in Pensacola, he was there on a training. He was part of the Saudi military, and the Saudi government, apparently, Trump spoke to the Saudi government, the Saudi king, and America has a good relationship with Saudi Arabia, so they expressed their concerns and their sadness over it. But that one would be attributed to one of the other motives, and that is ideological. This is apparently religion based. It was an extreme Muslim viewpoint, anti-Westerner, anti-Christian, whatever, anti anyone other than Muslim. So that would fit into the category of ideological. So we're seeing more and more of these, really, like I said, in every demographic. And what's the answer? I mean, how are we going to? Profiling is not okay, obviously, in our society today. But is that a tool that we should start using? I mean, is that something? The Israelis use profiling extensively. Their people are trained in profiling, and rarely does anybody get anything over on them in their homeland when it comes to carrying bombs or weapons into an airport or public area. So, it comes down to, is political correctness now working against us? I think probably so, which is not going to be popular with a lot of people. But profiling works so well with the Israelis. If we know that most most terrorists of any country, religion, whatever, are typically within 17 or 18 and 35. We know that the extreme Muslim are typically of Middle Eastern descent, though there are Muslims in a lot of Asian countries as well. But when it comes down to profiling an active shooter in general, there's it could be anyone, male, female, any age. And we've seen that historically, that's been the case. So we had 2 military active shooter incidences, or military involved. It happened, within a span of a week. So I'm not sure what in the world we're going to do there, except continue training. The training is I think what is going to help people respond to these incidences, and then of course continue to build up the security apparatus, whether it be electronic or physical, in organizations and schools. By the way, apparently it happened in a school, a classroom setting. So it must have been, the Pensacola shooting must have happened when they were having some sort of training for the airmen. So what are we going to do? It's crazy.
It's not going to go away. It's going to continue to happen. What can we do? I think in this particular instance, not only Naval Air Station in Pensacola, but installations across the globe are going to, look at their security procedures, do better jobs of instituting, tighter security. it's kind of like one bad apple spoils the whole bunch. In regards to, training foreign students, I think that's kind of been put on hold, especially with the flight school there in Pensacola. So I think, they're going to have to look at vetting these people better. In the past, I'm not sure that the U.S. has done much to. They basically rely on the the government from the country the students are coming from. I'm sure there to a degree is a certain amount of vetting on our part, but I think we're going to have to do a much better job on that in the future.
Yeah. I gave 2 A.L.I.V.E trainings at facilities last week, and both times, in fact, this is happening more and more often. And I totally agree with it. I don't address, we don't address it in the A.L.I.V.E program as much as I would like to, but the program is survival. It's not prevention. But both groups of people, somebody said, what are your thoughts on prevention and specifically mental health? And, I definitely think if I did a class on prevention, it would be almost entirely focused on how do we keep people from being in the mindset of wanting to do something like this. We talk about it in past episodes and in the training. We talk about mindset a lot, both of our mindset, security and survival, and the mindset of the killer and why they do it. And I believe when I talk about is, coping skills, there are people who, in most of these situations, whether it be the first motive, anger and revenge, the second ideological, and the third psychological, unless somebody is literally diagnosed as being psychotic, which at that point coping skills is not going to have anything to do with it because the wiring or chemicals is not functioning properly within the brain. Coping skills is what it comes down to. And, when you're upset, if you don't cope with that anger appropriately, you can do something like this. If you're depressed, if you've got some kind of personality or emotional dysfunction based on a inferiority complex, like some of these kids in schools, they're bullied, they're marginalized, they're turned down by girls, whatever. And if the coping skills were enhanced, improved, and they were literally coping with these outside stimulus that is creating an environment that they are not dealing with properly, if they could cope with those situations, I believe a majority of these people would never get to the place where they're going to do something like this. So, I'm probably going to start researching a little bit more in depth that portion of it, because I believe with the A.L.I.V.E program, we've got a pretty darn good solution, or at least guide to do what is necessary functionally and where your head should be psychologically and emotionally to cope, to deal with, to survive one of these situations. But I'm really fascinated with the idea of why they get to where they get to, and when they get there, how they don't cope with it or deal with it or process it in a more healthy fashion, so that frankly, this sort of thing is just not a solution to them. In the A.L.I.V.E program, we talk about the reason they do this is for power and control. Well, it is power and control, whether it be a husband who does this to a wife and her co-workers because she left him, and she's filed for 100% custody of the kids or whatever. Whether being people, employees or students feeling marginalized or humiliated or whatever by employees or students. There's got to be something that can be done to help these people avoid that end. And I know there's been some books on the subject to some degree, but I really believe we're going to have to start implementing some policies in schools and workplaces to, when these precursors are recognized, to start dealing with these people a little bit more directly. And in the training, we talk about being just a little bit kinder to our fellow man, but we talk about recognition of warning signs. So when we see these warning signs, not only do we have to say something, but then they have to be dealt with appropriately. But we've got to start doing something to help avoid these, and I think that will absolutely be the most effective way to start to curb them, so that we're not increasing in events, and body count every year will be decreasing. What do you think about that, Mark?
Well, I think you're absolutely correct. The problem we're facing is we're going to have to reprogram our culture to a great extent on how we step forward with information about other people. Um, we live in a time where you say something that another doesn't like and you're facing a lawsuit, or you get fired for saying something negative. Uh, I remember back when racial profiling back in the late 80s, early 90s was, at least in Austin, Texas, was and with Austin Police Department, that was racial profiling was a huge buzzword, and they were the police chief here was against racial profiling. Uh, but the issue with racial profiling was for people to look at signs, not necessarily look at race, but look at signs and look at behavior, look at to help step in to interdict something that they think might be happening in the future. And it's not just racial profiling, but it's just we I think over the past 10 or 15 years, however long it's been, we've just become so prone to being afraid of not saying something in fear of it hurting someone. And because people complain about things that people say. So, it's kind of like now, we always say, see something, say something. And I'll tell you, it's hard for people to take that step forward because they fear retribution, reprisals, and that retribution or reprisals can be in any number of different forms. So although I agree with you, it's going to be a huge paradigm shift away from what we've been led to think.
Yeah. And we saw that in, when the FBI interviewed the neighbors of the husband and wife team back in San Bernardino when they attacked the government building. The neighbors were interviewed and the FBI said, did you see anything that you thought was alarming or any red flags? And they said, yeah, absolutely. We saw this and that, and we were concerned about this. And the FBI said, well, why in the hell didn't you say something? And the response was, we didn't want to, be called racist. We didn't want people to think that we were racist. Well, because of the political correctness and this, it being so horrible to say anything about anybody for any reason, several people died when that could have been completely avoided and again, we talk about in the program, it's not about judging somebody for their sexuality, their religion, the color of their skin, any of that stuff. It's about judging behavior, and it's about speaking out, like you said, see something, say something. If that kind of behavior is witnessed and observed, it's got to become socially acceptable, because the risk is so great by not saying something, to bring to someone's attention, hey, I just thought that I thought this was a little odd. And in the training, we talk about, if it's in the workplace or in a school, if you're close enough to that person, then just ask them directly and say, hey, you look like you're stressed out. I know you got some stuff going on in your life. I know you were bullied by the guys on the football team, whatever. Are you okay? Do you want to talk about it? And if you're not comfortable with that, then go to a supervisor or go to the HR manager, go to a teacher, go to a counselor, go to a principal and say, I just noticed some behavior and some things that were said by this person that are alarming. And I would hate to not say something and then something terrible happen. So we're just going to have to, one, recognize the warning signs, which we hammer home in the A.L.I.V.E. training. And two, once we recognize them, say something. And if we're wrong, we're wrong. And more often than not, it won't be an active shooter. But, so many of these active shooters, as we know, are suicidal first. Even if we say something and there's somebody gets involved and they talk someone off the ledge, maybe they'll even stop a suicide rather not just an active shooting and mass killing. Either way, it has got to be the norm to observe and recognize these signs and then talk to somebody about it, whether it be the person that the signs are coming from or someone close to them, above them, at school or at work, whatever. But that's the only way we're going to prevent these things, I think. So well, hopefully next podcast we won't have any recent events to talk about. I believe we're on the impede or violent step that we do at the podcast when we don't have these incidents to talk about. So next time, with any luck, we will be able to do another step of the A.L.I.V.E program. And for any new viewers joining us for the first time, A.L.I.V.E stands for Assess, Leave, Impede, Violence, and Expose. And it's a training program that's been around for over 5 years and trained thousands and thousands of people, and even have at least one person that survived an active shooter in Las Vegas and credits the course with their survival because they knew what to do, and otherwise they believe they would not have known what to do. So anyone interested in the program, it is activeshootersurvivaltraining.com. You can get the book, you can look at the online training, the in-person training. But importantly and exciting to Mark and I, since Mark is one of our instructors, on January 24th and 25th, we will be having another A.L.I.V.E certified instructor course. So anyone wanting to learn the A.L.I.V.E program and teach it to their employees, to their friends, to their family, to clients, whatever, they will learn the program over a 2-day period and become certified in that. Mark, do you have anything else before we take off?
Not really. I know it's a special time of the year for most of us, and I just want to take this opportunity to wish your viewers and listeners a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. May it be safe and filled with love and joy, and hopefully that none of us will be affected by the things we've been talking about here today.
Yes, excellent point, Mark. Thank you. And we will not likely have another A.L.I.V.E podcast this year in December because of all the things going on. So now is an excellent time for that message. I also would like to wish everyone a Merry Christmas, Happy Holiday, whatever you celebrate. I hope it's wonderful and warm and safe, and you enjoy friends. And we will look forward to our seeing you again with our next podcast, which will be in early January. Mark, I want to thank you as usual. You are a phenomenal representation of the A.L.I.V.E brand and a great contributor and a good friend. And I also wish you a wonderful holiday. If I don't see you before the next podcast, thank you for being on, my friend.
Thank you. And you too, Michael.
All right, everybody, be safe and have a great holiday. Bye-bye.